Somebody had asked me to do a little video on how I reload these Tokarev rounds. It's actually pretty straightforward. They reload fairly easy. The main thing is to be sure and get enough flare on the case with the lead bullets. It isn't so bad with the jacketed bullets, but the cast, if you don't flare that case enough, they will screw up on you. So these cases are all primed and sized. And I'm sure, people always talk down the scoops, but I've done tests on this. And I can be very accurate with those scoops. Depending on the powder, some powders are harder than others to measure. The red dot is a little harder than the bullseye. But it works very well for me. And this is one of the few calibers where, this press can be converted to a progressive, you just put a driving link in there and it will automatically rotate. And this is one of the few calibers that would actually be useful for, but it isn't that hard to turn with my hand either. Because these, you can go many different directions with these. And this die is the crimp die, which, like I say, you do have to flare the case quite a little. So it's kind of important to have that crimp die, because that is a short little bullet, which is very easy to get in there cockeyed. But that crimp die takes any oddities out of them. But it goes along pretty well. It doesn't take me very long to reload a bunch up. But one other thing I was going to talk about, like I say, when you use the jacketed bullets, these are the 85 grain Sierra, you don't really have to flare the case that much. They slide in pretty easily. But one thing I've heard from several people is to use that 30 caliber bullet that's made for the M1. Now, here I'll show you the problem I have with them. They're 110 grain. And they're considerably longer than this 85 grain. Now what happens, in order to keep that length down, your overall length, you end up having to seat that bullet way back in the case. These have got a very short neck on them. And if you seat that bullet back that far, that's bound to screw with your pressures, because then it isn't, like if it's seated right where the neck starts, fine, it works just like a piston. But if you get further back in there, that changes the way the pressure acts. It's not something I'm comfortable with on any of the calibers that I load, so I just don't do it. And I know somebody had said, well, geez, that seems like a small bullet, this 93 grain. Well, there's actually load data for these for even a 60 grain. Because the idea behind these is, small bullet, traveling fast. And that does work. Very little recoil, real flat shooting. All in all, kind of a interesting little caliber. And these are the exact same bullet I shoot in the Nagant. So I got plenty of them on hand. But I do like the way it behaves. But now, me using these scoops, like I say, I do that on, sometimes I get real finicky and I'll measure every load on certain ones I'm loading. But normally I find the load I want that works, get the scoop that matches up, and that is what I do. Because with this and with Bullseye, I've run tests, throw my load over and over and see how close it is to what, on the scale to what it should be. And like I say, the red dot is a little flakier. That's a little harder. You have to watch a little closer. You can usually get like within 2/10. Usually it's within 1. But with Bullseye, I really very seldom get off at all. And if I do, it's never more than 1/10 of a grain. Those fancy powder measuring devices, I mean, you could put something like that on here too. But that doesn't mean they're going to be exact. Just, it's the same sort of thing going on, but it's going on where you can't see it. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's accurate. I figure I can be a lot more accurate keeping an eye on things. I can see exactly how much powder I'm putting in. If the scoop looks wrong, I can dump it and start over again. But I think that works very well. And some of these I've got the, otherwise I'll use, the funnel and dump in. But on these, certain of the lead dyes have got the through the dye, powder dye, the expanding dye. And I like the way that works. Partly because especially if you have powders that are a little on the sticky side, there's kind of a floating cone in there, and when it comes down, it makes a jerk and pops any loose powder off. See, there's a little play in there, and then it makes a jerk, and so that knocks any loose powder. So they seem to fill very cleanly. Now, see, I didn't like that one because I got a little carried away. So I dump her back. But easy caliber to load for. But the main thing is you do want that crimp die. Because like I say, I tried load without it. It didn't work so hot. Well, you could get by with the jacketed bullets, but even then I'd sooner have that crimp die. But see right here, if I had that little rod that did the auto indexing, it would work for these. But I never, I switch calibers all the time. I've got so many of these turrets laying around. I've got to have at least 10 of them, and I'm switching all the time, so I don't want to get locked into one caliber. It's possible I could do it, set one up to run for, with the auto index, buy a whole nother press, and set that with the auto index just for the pistol stuff. But I don't think I'd bother. It ain't that hard to turn it by hand. And I think you're less likely to make a mistake. But that's all there is to it. Like I say, the jacketed bullets, they slide right in nice. And these are, like the 93 grain size to 311. It seems to be a very nice working bullet for these. Though I would be curious to try. It's in the Lee papers that they've got a listing for a 60 grain jacketed bullet. But then you're cranking 1,713 feet per second. But that's an interesting idea. I shouldn't be yapping when I do this. I forget where I'm at. But I know when I bought this gun, it was funny because the place I bought it from, they had no idea what the hell these were. Didn't understand it at all, and he said, well, what do they go, about 800 feet per second? I had to tell him, no, you're really looking at double. I don't think he believed me. But it's an interesting theory. You know, small bullet, we're really cranking. But fun to shoot. And, you know, like I say, actually very easy to reload for. And the brass is Starline brass, which is available. And the bullet is just that Lee mold. I happen to have the 6 gang mold, but because I go through a lot of these bullets just for that. I got it. And I'm glad I got that now because, you know, I tend to, with an automatic, you tend to go through a lot. But I got no problems with it. Cheap to shoot, you know, that's very little powder you're using. Very little lead. I should figure it out sometime, but I'm sure it's much more economical than a 22. Though, you know, primers keep going up in cost. What was it I paid? Well, these are $4.49 for 100. You know, so they go, you know, primers are kind of a killer, but I was glad to get the CCI primers. Yeah. Easy to do. And these Sarah bullets, these 85 grain jacketed, they are available. I think, if I remember, I think they came from Graphs. And I've actually found myself finding more stuff at Graphs. A lot of times they'll have stuff that Midway doesn't have, or Midway is back ordered on. Well, Graphs will have it in, so that's fine. Well enough to work with.